But in this hour, euthanasia. This is in the news right now. Is this a slippery slope or a merciful end to suffering? Assisted suicide is currently banned in the United Kingdom altogether. I live in Oregon, which is one of two states, Oregon and Washington State in the United States, where physician-assisted suicide is legal. It's called Death with Dignity here. That's the name of the act. But physician-assisted suicide is currently banned in the UK, but not so in Switzerland. And recently, international headlines were made when a man who was not dying, famous conductor, British conductor, one of the BBC Philharmonic's most famous conductors, British maestro Edward Downes, and his wife chose to end their lives together this week. He had struggled in recent years as his hearing and sight failed. He was 85 years old, he was blind, and he was going deaf. His wife had been his primary caregiver. She was 74, and she was in the very last stages of a very painful terminal cancer. When she chose to go to Switzerland to end her life, he chose to go with her and end his. Should he have been allowed? For those who hold that life is too sacred to squander in its final days or weeks in needless suffering, physician-aided suicide is like both ethically and legally appropriate. For those who think that life is so sacred that you shouldn't end it before a natural process, regardless of how painful that process is, physician-assisted suicide is suicide and a grave and mortal sin. And we're going to have two guests on in our first hour. Dr. Tad Pacholski is going to be with us, and in fact he's here right now. And in the second, right after this, we're going to have Dr. Patricia O'Halloran on, the Vice President of PCCEF Washington with the Franciscan Health System in Tacoma, Washington, a physician who's also opposed to physician-assisted suicide. Dr. Tad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
My apologies if I've mangled your last name. Your pronunciation?
It would be Pacholczyk.
Pacholczyk.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Nobody ever gets it right, as you might imagine.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And you are the Director of Education and a neuroscientist and staff ethicist at the National Catholic Bioethics Center.
That's correct.
And we're going to be discussing with a physician the dilemmas for a medical doctor on this. You are also a priest.
That's right, a Roman Catholic priest.
And there is at least one denomination in the United States now that has said that the United Church of Christ, which also was one of the very earliest to embrace gays. In fact, they were running ads in the 2004 election that basically suggested, if you're gay or if you're a minority of any sort, you're welcome in our church. That drew a lot of flack to them. They have come out and endorsed the right of people to make decisions about their end of life. Why are you opposed to a person in great pain with a lousy quality of life ending their life in a way that is gentle and painless?
Because I think that at the end of the day, our lives are a gift to us. Sometimes people say something like, well, ending one's life should be a personal decision. But it wasn't a personal decision about coming into this world in the first place or about beginning our life. In other words, our life has a quality about it that it was given to us, it was entrusted to us, and we have to be good stewards of that life.
But isn't maintaining a high quality of it part of being a good steward? I mean, we're not talking about, you said coming into life. We're not talking about children here. We're talking about people who are well beyond the age of consent. This is no longer just, hey, this was given to me, I have to do this. Shouldn't there, isn't there any appropriate frame, and not just within Catholicism, but within religion in general, isn't there any appropriate frame that you can imagine that would say that to prolong suffering needlessly is itself a sin?
I think not, because I think, Thom, the root issue here is precisely a misunderstanding about suffering. That you used the phrase in the opening, needless suffering. Mm-hmm. Is there really such a thing as needless suffering? I mean, what is it? What is suffering, and what is its purpose? What is its context for us as humans? Are we simply animals that when things don't feel quite right, we just put them down? Or are we those who can deal with our suffering, those who can...
But we don't just put our animals down. We had a dog that we had for 18 years, and she became deaf, she became blind, she was incontinent. We finally put her down when she could no longer walk, and she was just soiling herself terribly. But it was a very, very difficult decision for
Sure. It was definitely a difficult decision, but my point is that animal couldn't do anything with the suffering. You and I can. We can undergo personal growth, and this is hugely important to being a human being. In other words, I sometimes say to people, look, when you have childbirth, you have to suffer a great deal through that, but then a child is born. Something has happened. A joy has come into the world. There has been something good that has come out of the pain and the suffering. But our tendency
is the pain of childbirth is, to compare that with the excruciating pain of terminal cancer and of dying seems to me an unfair comparison. And
it seems to me to be a very apt comparison, because when we die, we ourselves are being born into a new life.
Yeah.
And we have a whole destiny beyond the grave that the meaning of suffering very much connects with.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a very apropos analogy. All of our suffering here has meaning. It reorients our being. I remember hearing a famous journalist, Malcolm Muggeridge. He was being interviewed one time, kind of looking back over his life, and he said, honestly, the only time I ever grew was when I suffered. And I thought, what a powerful statement. He's kind of encapsulated really what is at the root of this question. Physician-assisted suicide is a cop-out. At the end of the day, it is a short-circuiting of all the possibilities.
If suffering
that God is offering.
I know that there are entire religious traditions built around suffering. In the Philippines, people at Eastern time, crucify themselves. There are religions where people put themselves on hooks and swing themselves around. There's self-flagellation. It's a big part of Sunni, as I recall, or Shiite, one or the other. I think it's the Sunnis that... No, it's the Shias that whip themselves with chains every year. The suffering, and then the smaller suffering of vows of poverty and fasting and things like that, and which I've done. I've done fasting. It seems though that your argument, the logical extension of your argument, is that inflicting suffering on somebody is to do them a gift. That the Holocaust was some sort of a gift from the Jews.
Absolutely not. What you have done is misappropriated and misunderstood the core argument. I often think of it in simpler terms. When you have children and you raise the children, they often encounter difficult moments. And what does a good parent who has a proper vision of these things say? The three famous words: offer it up. There's a reason for this. It'll help you grow.
Yeah.
Your sufferings can help others.
You are making, I think right now,
you would not inflict the sufferings on your children.
Yeah, I think you are making the one argument that I would make with myself for remaining conscious at the moment of dying, which is I am just curious as all get out about what it's going to be like. But and so I would rather not be profoundly and deeply sedated. But if I was in excruciating pain, well, Dr. Tad, ncbcenter.org, by the way, is your website. And if you could pronounce your last name for us again, please, sir.
Sure. Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Dr. Tad Pacholczyk, thank you so much for being with us, sir, today.
It's really a pleasure.
Good talking with you. 16 minutes past the hour. Coming up next, why do conservatives want to put government between you and the end of your life?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hi folks, Thom Hartmann here. History shows us time and again what's really of value. Governments and their currencies come and go, but one